Yes, it is. And, as she winds her way back home, it's important to notice that she was an incredible Habs fan. We have, of course, the Halifax Forum, and for many, many, many years, we had the Halifax Canadians, who were the American League affiliate with the Montreal Canadiens, and it was a favorite of hers, as were the Mooseheads. I mean, she participated in producing the broadcast as the motorcade winds its way through. So, it'll go along the very Oxford Street and then towards Agricola and Almond and then on to Woodbine. So it will wind its way in and around the areas that Jen frequented. As I mentioned, she went to Dalhousie University as an undergrad, and of course, inside Dalhousie, we've got University of King's College, and she'll be going past there as well before her final resting place at the Atlantic Funeral Home.
Mm-hmm. Such an emotional time for so many people there, and we are seeing on our screens so many motorcyclists following that procession as it makes its way, led by police, of course, through the downtown core of Halifax. Richard, we've touched on in our coverage today of this procession how sad and ironic it is that Captain Jennifer Casey has completed her final cross-country journey, but it was never supposed to be this way. Of course, that journey was supposed to end in Vancouver on the final leg of the Canadian Forces Snowbirds Operation Inspiration, which left Halifax, as you mentioned 2 weeks ago. You mentioned Captain Casey actually sent you a message as she was flying over the newsroom that the two of you used to work together, and that we understand the procession is going to pass by momentarily here. Operation Inspiration was meant to uplift and inspire Canadians in what had already been such a challenging time for so many people living under the global pandemic. That mass shooting in Halifax and Portapique, as we touched on earlier. No doubt, I never had the fortune to meet Jen, but from everything that we have heard of her, it sounds like that Operation Inspiration really had her hands all over it.
It did. It was really a reflection of her. And when she flew over and tweeted 95.7, the folks in the newsroom, I mean, it was just amazing from what I understand. Megan Groff, who was the producer at the time and a very, very close friend of hers, actually posted the tweet and said that, Jen had just flown over. And I was just sitting outside in my backyard when they flew over us, and they couldn't have been more than a couple of 100 feet off the ground. And it was just an inspiring sight. And so this Operation Inspiration really reflected who Jen was, and she really added her personality to it, and you could see that it was very much a reflection of her and a part of her, how they were going across the country to get us all, pull us all together. We're sort of not a divisive bunch, but we're a mosaic of many different parts in Canada. And this operation was kind of the stitching that pulled us all together in times of strife and trouble. And so I guess that's what's calling to us right now, is that she is pulling us together yet again in another way, and in such a sad way.
And she continues to inspire and unite Canadians even in death, as we watch this procession wind its way into downtown Halifax. Take a look at just all those people, all those Nova Scotians that have come out to pay their respects to Captain Jennifer Casey. Richard, just before we let you go, how will you remember your friend and your former colleague, as you know her, Jen? And how would you want the public to remember Captain Jennifer Casey?
Well, I'm looking at her picture right now, and she's standing in front of the snowbirds, and she's smiling. She's just absolutely beaming. And that's how I'll remember her, a beaming, smiling person inside and out with an infectious laughter and a wicked, wicked sense of humor. So all of those things put together embody what I'll remember with Jen.
A remarkable Canadian by all accounts. Richard Zorowski, a friend and former colleague of Captain Jennifer Casey. Thanks for being with us today. And thanks for our viewers.
Sarah, thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. Thank you for your time. And thank you to our viewers who are with us. We'll be back with more live coverage of the homecoming for Captain Jennifer Casey after a quick break. this huge outpouring of support in Nova Scotia. You mentioned those Haligonians. Everything has come to a stop essentially in Halifax right now. Everybody paying their respects to the sacrifice and the service of Captain Jennifer Casey. What does this mean to you as a Canadian Forces member yourself and a former Snowbirds commander?
Oh, I'm actually welling with a bit of pride. I think not only it represents what Canadians are about, but really the spirit of the East Coast. And I will say personally that we loved going to the East Coast, and we loved the Halifax Air Show when we went there. And if we were afforded a day off, we always made sure we could have a day off in Halifax because of the reception of the people. And it quite simply was a lot of fun to be there. And I think it is about the people there. Wherever we went, they embraced us. And I remember even, silly things like just stopping in a local store to buy some replacement garments, and they recognized the Snowbirds, and they were like, they wanted to chat with you about the most mundane things. And I think that's just exemplary of what the East Coast spirit is about. And so that makes me happy to see Halifax embracing so deeply Jen at this moment.
And by all accounts, Captain Casey embodied what you referenced, just what we all love about Atlantic Canadians, just largely so warm, so friendly, so easy to talk to and so approachable, as you mentioned there. We had an earlier guest talk about how Halifax is not just a university town, they are a military town, as you referenced there. A lot of affection, a lot of respect for the military. Can you elaborate a bit more on just your experience in Halifax, in Nova Scotia, as a Canadian Forces member?
Yes, and my first tour as an F-18 pilot, I did a lot of work in the East Coast as we positioned F-18s out there for various training exercises with the Navy and NORAD. And those were the ones I quickly learned that I wanted to be part of, because it was truly a wonderful place to work. And then, as I mentioned later in my airshow career, I've came to learn that the East Coast air shows, and Halifax in particular, were so engaging and so warm. And they really valued, you really felt you were valued as a Canadian Forces member, but even more so as a snowbird, and being able to wave the flag for them at that time.
And a prevailing theme and description of Captain Casey from all of those who knew her is she was a really great teammate. And whether that was as a friend, whether that was as a Canadian Forces member, or as a colleague in her former profession as a journalism, we had a former colleague of hers just talking about how uniting she was within the newsroom that she worked in Halifax, that we understand this motorcade is just about to pass. That's a local newsroom where Captain Casey worked as a journalist until 2014, a local radio station called 95.7 Snowbirds. No doubt an even tighter-knit team the Snowbirds are, and Scratch, you know that all too well. Tell us about just how close the Snowbirds are as a unit and what that relationship is like among team members.
The Snowbirds is the epitome of teamwork, and I've been fortunate in my life to have been part of a few sporting teams and different organizations that in all rights are very tight organizations, but nothing has ever compared in my life to the teamwork and the sense of team that the Snowbirds brought me, and that level of teamwork is unparalleled.
And we're seeing this procession appear to come to a stop right here. We're seeing that Mountie crossing your screen, that flag at half-mast. Of course, the Mounties in Nova Scotia have suffered a huge loss of their own in recent weeks as well, and now they're tasked with leading this procession for another tragedy and the loss of another remarkable servicewoman. They're just going to, as we wait to see what is going on here, this actually appears to be the funeral home, which would be the final destination of this motorcade procession. Scratch, as we have you on the line here, we're just waiting to see what's going to happen next here. You talked about how close-knit the Snowbirds are, and see all those motorcycles going past there on your screen. You lost a pilot yourself during your time as Snowbirds commander. We know the team now is on operational pause, as the Canadian Forces puts it. What happens next, and what happens next for the grieving process, a very personal and intimate process for the Snowbirds themselves?
In an operational sense, the team is going to wait for some indication from the investigation about what's going to occur with the airplanes and what a timeline might be expected for that. So very much a time of waiting in an operational sense. But more importantly, the weeks coming are ones of the team readjusting to this new situation of grieving and going through that process, having lost a very close team member, and thinking at the same time about how to go forward with the team and what that means with the loss of Jen. She was a big part of the team, and she will be a big part of this entire year as it plays out for the team. And they will honor her and commemorate her in any way possible. I know in our case, in our year, that we made up special patches on our uniform that we wore with great pride that had the number 2 on it because we had lost our number 2 pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And that became a very, yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you there, Scratch. We know, just on your point there, this was going to be such a momentous year for the Canadian Forces Snowbirds, and I'm looking forward to get your take on this in just a few moments. We're just going to go to a quick break right now as we continue to watch that procession and the motorcyclists behind it continue to pass what appears to be the funeral home in downtown Halifax, where that motorcade is ending. Stay with us. We're back in just a few moments.